in defense of super PACs, of outside groups? Really? Jacob Sullum of the Reason Foundation, Reason.com, and Reason Magazine, senior editor of Reason Magazine, nationally syndicated columnist. Jacob, welcome back to the program, first of all.
Thank you.
I don't get it. Why do you think that our politics are improved by people like the Koch brothers, who help fund your institute, pouring $300 million, I guess is the number that we're up to now, into defeating the President of the United States? Two brothers.
Well, I think, it doesn't have to be people like the Koch brothers. It can be anybody.
But it is.
That's the beauty of the First Amendment. Look, people like George Soros and Peter Lewis and John Sperling, who are, much more to the left than the Koch brothers are.
They're not putting $300 million into this election.
No, but they can. The point is that they have that right. And, in fact, they've had it for years. Even before Citizens United, rich people could spend as much of their own money as they wanted on political messages. And, in fact, the Supreme Court has said that to try to impose limits on that would be a violation of freedom of speech, which I think is correct. What Citizens United has done is that it's made it easier for people to pool their resources. So even people who aren't billionaires can now put their money together via either newly created groups or long-standing groups, advocacy groups like the NRA or the ACLU or Greenpeace, or even groups that support limits on campaign finances, spending or contributions. All of these groups, no matter what their perspective, what their ideology, are free to spend money on political messages, even if it's to urge the election or defeat of a particular candidate. And I think that's as it should be.
I may further say that I have not observed men's honesty to increase with their riches. Thomas Jefferson, 1800. This is something that Jefferson railed about. At some length, by the way, the possibility that rich people might end up swinging our democracy. The fact that they could be rich people on the left or rich people on the right is absolutely friggin' irrelevant. But what you're arguing for is a form of aristocracy. You're saying, and I'm astounded to hear somebody who purports, to be an objectivist or libertarian or anything remotely like that, saying that we should, well, actually, no, I guess this is perfectly consistent with libertarian philosophy, that the rich should run everything, and if you're not rich, screw you.
Well, that's not the way it works. It's not just rich people.
That's absolutely the way it works.
In fact, the advantage of having so-called super PACs or what you might call outside groups or other advocacy groups that exist for a long time involved in the political process is that you can get people who don't have that much money, but they can pool their resources. And, for example, they can advocate to defeat people who support the Patriot Act. They can
all of us poor people can get together and try and take on the $30 million that Scott Walker has raised out of state. You realize that even with the labor unions that you guys vilify so aggressively, the total amount of money that the recall Walker. Please let me finish this sentence, Jacob.
Yeah.
The total amount of money that the recall Walker people have raised is $4 million. Walker has gone to out-of-state billionaires, from the Koch brothers to oil billionaires down in Texas to Wall Street people in New York City, and raised over $30 million, more than any governor has ever raised in the history of this country for any kind of a recall election. And you're saying that is okay?
Yeah, I'm saying it's okay because people from any side are free to collect money and spend money. Look, the unions are just as free as businesses are to spend money.
They shouldn't be.
United. Let me give you an example.
They shouldn't be.
Week where this helped advance a progressive issue. Okay, there was a primary in Texas just last week where a relative newcomer who had been a city councilman in El Paso named Beto O'Rourke defeated this longstanding incumbent. Now, one of the interesting things about them is that the incumbent, Sylvester Reyes, is a really unreconstructed drug warrior, about as hardline as you can
corrupt.
Imagine. He comes out of
he was corrupt, and everybody knew it.
And
that's why he lost.
O'Rourke has written a book favoring drug legalization and has condemned the war.
That was not the issue. Reyes was corrupt.
Well, that was one of the issues, but they also talked about drug policy in the campaign.
What you're doing, you're trying to take a single example in general. Let me tell you about one guy who took arsenic and survived. I guess we should go back to putting arsenic in our water.
Well, look, the same group that helped O'Rourke in his campaign, the campaign for primary accountability, is going around the country, and they're targeting long-standing incumbents who've gotten complacent, possibly corrupt, possibly lazy, not really representing their constituents anymore. And they're targeting them regardless of party. They're targeting Republicans and they're targeting Democrats. To me, this is a good thing. It shakes things up.
This is not a good thing. It is not a good thing to have the people. It is not a good thing to have the people with the most money have the greatest stick in our democracy. The fact of the matter is that retail politics is largely a thing of the past. Most political races are won based on television advertising, and television advertising is a function, pure and simple, of money. And I'm just astounded that anybody would say that it's a good thing for money to be the thing that decides politics. I'm horrified, Jacob. This is not just un-American. This is anti-American.
You still have to persuade people. We're still talking about speech. You're not bribing people.
Money is not speech.
You have to persuade people with your arguments. It is true that you need a certain amount of money.
If nobody can hear your argument, it doesn't matter.
Lots of money is not a guarantee of winning. Look at Carly Fiorina in California and what's her name, the right-wing woman in Connecticut. They both spent huge amounts of money, and they lost by sizable margins. So clearly, it's not just about spending the money. People have to be receptive to your message.
In 98% of political races in the United States, the person who spends the most money wins.
Well, the incumbents have tremendous advantages. They have over 90% reelection rate.
96% for incumbents because they have more access to money.
Money or outside groups helps to defeat that advantage. I think that's a good thing. It shakes up the races.
Makes
it more likely that somebody like Reyes can be thrown out.
In 98% of races, the person with the most money wins. You tell me that's not a corrupt system?
No, it's not a corrupt system because the money that they collect may be a reflection of their support. I mean, you're confusing correlation with causation. Just because they spend the most money and win doesn't mean spending the most money was the thing that made them win.
I am asserting causation.
Right.
I am,
but without evidence. The only evidence is the correlation. You're saying because the people who spend more money tend to win, then that must be because they're spending more money. But maybe they're spending more money because they're attracting more support, and that allows them to raise more money. And if anything, allowing outside groups and independent groups to participate in this process.
To extend your please don't filibuster these things, Jacob. We have a limited. I'm not filibustering you. If you wouldn't filibuster me, I'd appreciate it. The fact of the matter is, though, that that sounds nice in a perfect world, and it sounds nice where everybody has access to money. But if you've got the majority of Americans living, the mean income in the United States, the median income in the United States is $26,500. People who are earning that amount of money, which is more than half of all Americans, do not have the money to participate in politics, to swing elections. And for you to say that the billionaires, the people who fund right-wing think tanks and objectivist and libertarian think tanks and all this other kind of nonsense, or for that matter, George Soros, who's funding the Center for American Progress or whatever it is he's funding these days, funding left-wing things, that they should be able to swing elections just smacks to me of old-fashioned British aristocracy.
I'm not saying they should be able to swing elections. I'm saying they should be able to make their case just like anybody else can. It's always been a problem that some people have access to a bigger audience than other people. Look at newspapers, look at the TV networks, look at people with popular websites. Obviously, they reach a lot more people than others. Is that unfair? Should we try to equalize that and say, no, you reach too many people, you have to shut up now because you talk too much? I know that you think that about me, but
no, it's not what I'm suggesting. But I do think that we should ban television advertising for politics the same way we ban it for tobacco, and let people make their cases like they did back, in the Nixon Kennedy debates. But anyhow, Jacob Sullum, Reason.com. You can read all about it. The senior editor of Reason magazine. Thank you, Jacob.